You're on the podcast
with Dino and Ashley.
I think that we definitely nailed that one.
Yeah, that was pretty good. All right, so I actually came a little bit more prepared.
Perfect.
Yeah. All right, so I think that this is good. This is our first podcast, obviously. Hello, I'm Dino.
I am Ashley.
Why don't you start off by just kind of like saying a little bit about who we are if people have never listened or never watched anything about us.
Okay, we are Dino and Ashley Patron. Really, we have just shared our story online basically for the past 8 years. What started out as just a page that I created for design stuff and like thrifted finds kind of started just to turn into a little bit more us sharing our marriage, our story. And after 6 months of being online, we moved into a trailer, and then that really shifted how we shared and how we showed up online. It was no longer about the thrifted finds, which is still something I love to do.
All right, so you started off on Instagram, and you started off by doing thrifted finds, and then from there you moved into a trailer. Continue. This is good.
Thank you. Then we moved into a trailer, and that just really changed us and rocked our world. That was after 8 years of marriage.
Why did you move into a trailer?
Oh, are we interviewing each other now?
A little bit, yeah. It's kind of fun.
Well, we moved into a trailer because we... I've always been a mover and a shaker. So I'm always wanted to make deals, make moves. And Dino was always like, no, we're not doing that.
This is accurate.
I'm the gas and Dino is the brakes. And so I happened to be just looking for a new house and, or some opportunity, something for us to do, I guess. Mm-hmm. At that point, I was very discontent in life. We found some land, and instead of, renting a house or doing anything like a normal person would do, we decided to buy this land, and we planned on building a house. And in the meantime, we bought a trailer and moved into the trailer on the land with our family of 3.
How many years were we married at that point?
8 years.
Okay. And how many years have we been married now?
18.
That's a lie.
Almost 18.
Ash and I count up.
I don't know why. Always up.
It's just like, I think
we're round up.
We're like fudgers. We're just like,
we want to like... bit.
So, all right. So we were married 8 years, and then we sold everything and moved into a trailer because reasons. And then, all right. So keep going.
So that at that time in our lives, that really just shifted who we were. We were just stripped away of everything that made Dino and Ashley. That was like the negative things, I think.
And how would you have described our marriage going for that first 8 years up until that point?
We were in love. We had a good life and good marriage, but we were just kind of, now looking back, I can compare it. We were kind of just living parallel lives. We're not super intentional in anything we were doing, not super, like not a lot of depth in our marriage. Although I think we thought we did then.
I think so too. I would say that if we were to ask ourselves back then, like, hey, how are you doing in marriage? We'd be like, crushing it.
Yeah.
Crushing it. And now, if you were to look back, or if you look back on that phase of life, like how much of the juice were you getting out of that squeeze kind of thing,
Juice. Oh man, we were just the worst. We were terrible.
Yeah.
It was awful.
So this kind of leads to some of the point of, I feel like, why you and I have decided why now, like on the podcast, like why start a podcast?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, so one of the things we started to do when we were in the trailer, because we were going through this huge shift in our lives and everything was changing, I was also going to this awesome Bible study that was really pushing, and not pushing, but promoting, advocating for healthy marriages and strong marriages in a way that I'd never heard before. And so I started sharing some of those things, and I was like, babe, I remember being in the trailer on our little tiny bed and saying, babe, I feel like I want to like share this. Should we like write a blog or write a book? And Dino's like, I don't want to write a book. Like, who's going to read our book anyways?
And at that point, I would say we were barely starting to like gain traction on like, hey, what if we do things slightly differently?
Yeah.
Because up until that point, I was still the Dino show, doing my own thing, pushing hard on my career, like when we moved into the trailer. And that was kind of my priority in life, was ensuring that my career was making forward progress, right? I had the family, I had all the things, I was checking all the boxes on like the family side of things, right? Like I'm a very a structured person. I like to have like goals I go after and things like that, right? So I'd say like, oh, I was doing all the right things. I still had my boys and I had fun and all the things that I wanted to do, video games and that kind of thing. And I had my career and I was pushing hard on that. And then Ash and we had a marriage, and I'm like, hey, marriage is good, you know.
We had 3 kids also.
Yeah. And I got to a point too where I was like, I kind of like hit the logical conclusion of like that structure of life, right? Like at least in my career kind of thing, and my, you know, that the way that I'd structured just my life was, I got to a point where I was like, this is not fulfilling. Mm-hmm. You go all the way to the end of this road, and I was like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, where does that lead?
Yeah. And I feel like for me, we moved into the trailer right around the time when I kind of like started a new job, and then started to deprioritize the importance of like my career. I moved from like a director and leadership role back down to just not doing all the pushing my career. And just for me, I was just coding then. I was just being able to like check boxes and like just do the thing that I needed to do for work. But for me, that was like, it was huge, because I was like, okay, I feel like I had this, you know, everybody sets whether you know it or not, you've already set in your life like a hierarchy of importance of things, right? And I took a step back and I was like, where is the hierarchy of importance of all the things that I'm doing in my life, right? My career, my physical fitness, my health, my marriage, my kids, my relationship with the Lord, my marriage, like, right? And everything was
all over the place.
Yeah, it was all over the place. It was not in the order that I feel like I really wanted it to be in. And whether I like said this out loud or wrote it down or not, but like I sat there and I was like, okay, let me just like basically get a piece of paper in my mind and start to like structure the importance of these things top to bottom. And as I started to like write these things down, it was like, my relationship with the Lord is my number one important thing in my life. And then number 2 is my relationship with Ash. And then number 3 was our family, like family structure. And then I was like, okay, there's a pretty big gap then after number 3. And it's like the next most important things are things like, you know, my career, our community, church community, and things like that. Being able to like feed into other people, like invest in them and things like that, right? Like, and I feel like the trailer kind of like shifted a lot of things.
I did. It kind of just forced us into that. Like I said, it stripped us away from the things that we would kind of run to, you know, video games, me shopping, just like not knowing who I was or not having a foundation in anything. And I would say kind of the same for you. Like we just both were a little bit wanderers at that point.
I feel like you also, for the first 8 years, you did want more. Like you would, I'm going to use the word nag, but I know that has a little bit of a negative connotation.
I don't remember that. Just kidding.
I remember.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you would nag, or you'd be like,
worst.
Stop doing this.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And then around that same point, you came back and had a shift.
I did have a shift. Yeah.
What kind of caused that shift?
Yeah. I mean, I think, like I said, I went to this Bible study, and it's things you've heard before that I had, it just hit me at a different time. So I don't know if that was just grace from the Lord, just, you know, allowing me to hear it for reals this time and it to shake me like I was ready for it. But it was just that, basically, it was just that to shift the way that I thought about Dino. For so long, I had tried to be his mom. I had tried to control, tried to lead our family, basically. I think that's the big one, is I was trying to lead you. And
would you say at that time I was leading?
I think you were trying, but I was trying harder.
Yeah, I would agree.
Right?
I don't think I was necessarily trying. Not overly, but yeah.
I think you wanted to.
I wanted to.
I was trying. You wanted to.
I think that
didn't want to. That's the funny thing.
I would say that in my head, I was like, I'm doing a good job, you know, but I think those are stories you tell yourself.
Yeah.
It's like to make yourself feel
These
good.
are the stories we tell ourselves.
Right? Like you create a narrative,
Yeah.
a picture of yourself and like how good of a person you are. So basically you can do day-to-day life without feeling guilty, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I'd say like I definitely thought that I was leading, but I don't think that I was in any way leading. Definitely not by example.
No, and I really didn't want to. And I think that's what kind of shook me is she said, you are getting in the way of what God is trying to do in your husband's life. When you are trying to take control, when you're trying to take that position, you're blocking what God is trying to do. And I don't even know if she remember if she said this or if I just, thought of it afterwards because it really hit me. But I thought, man, what a relief. I don't want that job. I don't want to be Dino's mom. He already has mom. He doesn't need me to do that. And what a relief to kind of hear that I don't have to lead him and correct him and change him. If I wanted to see something come about in Dino's life, I mean, we talked about it, everything, even back then, even when we weren't as intentional, but it's not like I wouldn't communicate the things to him. It was, choosing the right times and the right tones and the right heart. And, when we would talk about things, but really it just came down to praying that God would take over these things, whether it was like at that point, I remember specifically, it was like a physical activity that you would do something for your health, that you would take care of your body. And I would before nag Dino and make you feel bad and be passive aggressive about things. I mean, I was just constantly cutting him down.
Yeah. All the way through my 30s, I had basically zero importance on my health or nutrition. And ultimately that kind of came to a head. Slight tangent here. But yeah, like that came to a head. I became very unhealthy and then mentally became very, what I would say is not stable.
Yeah.
But anyways.
Yeah. I mean, that was basically it. I just would ask God and I would ask God to align me instead of putting so much focus on Dino and trying to change him. I was like, Lord, change me, change my heart, change my desires. Like I want to lust and long for my husband. I want to love and adore him for whatever state he's in, for the gamer, for the person that doesn't work out. Find the things that I just love and adore about him. So that's what really shifted in my mind and in my life is I asked God to change me. And then also my prayer life for you became a lot stronger just in the way that we interacted. And I stepped back. I didn't want to be the lead. I can be a strong woman. I can be a strong wife and a strong mother, but I don't want to lead our family. I want you to lead the family. And so I think also by me stepping back, you had to put on the big boy pants.
Yeah. We've written about this in the book as well, but the gist of it was like, okay, now she's no longer going to try and drive. That means I got to drive, right? Like for a long time, I would just kind of sit there in the passenger seat and allow her to do her thing. And then when she didn't want, we'd kind of trade back and forth and I'd drive here and drive.
It wasn't working though.
No. And then it was like, wow, you're 100% hands off. That's a very like big call to like be something better.
But I want to say like, it wasn't like, all right, you lead, you do it now. It was like, my heart was that I wanted the baby.
Go watch your show. Okay. I
love you. She's so cute.
I know. She like creeps in.
All right. Sorry.
Okay. So I just want to say that it wasn't that I just was like, all right, now you lead. You want to be the leader? Do it.
Yeah.
Because I think, again, it's a matter of the heart there.
Yeah.
But I really was like, okay, Lord, I don't want to be the leader. And I know this is what you want. You want Dino to lead. So like, I'd pray for you that you would have, discernment and integrity in your job and wisdom leading our family. And you'd be the spiritual leader of our family. I had the soft heart, and that was from the Lord, but I had the soft heart to allow you to do that. Because if I would have come at you hot and heavy, like being all agitated with it, again, passive aggressive or it was aggressive.
Yeah, it was more of like hey, I'm going to give you the space to do this and I'm going to back you up.
And I trust you.
Yeah, I trust you. I'm going to back you up. So yeah, I think that definitely was one of the main initial kind of like jumping off points for where I feel like our marriage kind of started to shoot up.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of getting back to some of the points of the podcast, and how much of how do you feel like you could potentially help somebody else follow a similar formula if they felt in similar ways to what you and I have kind of described back in the day.
Yeah, so this goes back to the trailer. So this was on my heart. I was so excited about what I was learning and just the little things that I was seeing already within our marriage just from us making these small changes. And again, when I look back now, we were just little babies, like trying to figure it out. But it really was the start of that. And so I had a heart just to want to share it. So we started doing, instead of writing a book at that point, we lived in a trailer. We had no idea how to do anything. Instagram had, actually we did the first one on YouTube. We did a marriage live on YouTube. And then we started doing marriage lives on Instagram, basically just sharing what we were learning, sharing our story. And it wasn't like do these 10 things and you're going to have the best marriage ever, which is funny because now I feel like, not that we have a 1 through 10 list, but I do think that we have a formula of something that is worth sharing. So while we were just sharing our story before, and that's what we're going to continue to do, I do think that there is more depth now.
Yeah.
Don't you agree?
Absolutely. So I think that especially in the last 2-3 years, because it was 2 years ago, Ash and I started to talk about this idea of doing a podcast. Ash and I both started to basically formulate a bit of a structure of what would this look like? What do we actually have to share here? And I feel like now is the time. Now's a good opportunity for us to be able to come forward and be like, hey, this is kind of our perspective. And I think this is, if you were to ask yourself, what am I going to get out of this podcast if I listen, right? Ash and I will share our perspective based on a biblical worldview of how to structure your marriage to ultimately get the most out of it. That's how I would
taking it to 11.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's that mean? What's it mean to take it to 11?
Well,
what's
the real meaning or the podcast meaning?
We'll share the innuendos and the.
Oh yeah, when we get a little bit deeper, we'll let you know what taking it to 11 really means once we get a little bit closer. Taken to 11 though is a term that Dino and I use in secret in front of the children when we want to have fun that night, taking it to another level. And we'll disclose what that level is maybe at some point. But it also is just when we were talking about the podcast, I was like, what could we name it? And you're like, man, taking it to 11. It really has turned into more of just, the life that we live together, the intentionality. I feel like we've been intentional with our marriage and our lives truly nonstop for the last 9 years No, 10 years. 10 years. Because
10
it was 8 years.
Super intentional about it?
8 years of just kind of going through side by side. And then 10 years now, because it's 18 almost. and now it's been this 10 years. So there's God's, I feel like he's just really used us in so many beautiful ways for us to share. Yeah. And I know you, Dino, and I have felt so strongly about that is, there's so many times we're like, let's just shut off all of social media and let's not talk to anybody anymore. It's just too crazy out there. But we still just have that little nudging. And God has had us go through some crazy, amazing stuff, these ups and downs that have been so beautiful, some so difficult. And we just still feel like we are in the position to be able to share and maybe it resonates with somebody. Yeah. Maybe our story resonates with somebody. So taking it to 11 is us just striving to have a full marriage together, a full life together, one that gives God glory in everything that we do. And it's just this intentional drive that we have for one another and for our life.
Yeah, I'd say I completely agree with everything you just said. At the same time, I also think that it's the general idea behind taking to 11 is that if you really think that 10 is the maxed out, let's go one step further, right? And I feel like you and I, again, if you look back at where we were at, first 8 years of our marriage, it was we're already cranked up all the way, and it's well, what if we just did a little bit more?
Yeah,
right. What if you got exposed to a little bit more depth in your marriage, a little bit more intimacy of closeness? What if I reduce the walls that I have between you and I, right? What if you start to just crank it up a little bit more beyond what it is that you actually feel like is possible, what is the net result of that?
Yeah. And I think that, some people, you know, remember when we saw that one thing online and it was like kind of belittling striving for a life that's extraordinary, and that like, oh, the ordinary is beautiful. Why are you striving for more?
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Yeah. Just appreciate what you have. Is the gist of it.
And of course, like we actually had a big conversation about this because I was like, that's interesting because I get where this person is coming from and what they're saying. You know, like the simple life is beautiful and we don't have to have a bunch of things. We don't have to have like this abundance for happiness to have happiness. But then at the flip side, I was like, man.
Or you don't need more than what you have to be happy.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the flip side of it, we were like, man, we have seen, because we have continued to put in the work, because we have continued to be intentional, if we would have stopped 5 years ago, man, we would have missed out on so much depth of intimacy and depth in our marriage and our lives and what God wanted to show us. So we love living the extraordinary, but it's for the Lord. We love, you know, striving to grow more, to grow closer to Him. Yeah. And so I think it's, again, a matter of the heart, but that's really the take it to 11 as well. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. We've done like podcasts with like intentional parenting, and I love that. I love the name of the intentional parenting thing. And I feel like this is like the intentional marriage, right? Like with intent, if you're intentional about your marriage, like you're investing in it, you're trying to get more out of it. You're trying to help the other person, like be a better person kind of thing. Like,
I think that word too has kind of gotten a little like, people hear it and they're like, oh yeah, what intentional living? I do that.
Yeah.
Or I've had a lot of people even online be like, what does that mean? Yeah. What does it even mean to be intentional? And what would you say is living an intentional life?
Yeah. If you're living with intent, it means that you have some sort of aspirational goal. You've done the work to understand a newer, more like better destination of where you want to get to. And then you're making daily decisions that sacrifice the things that I want right now for the things that I want most. And the things that I want most is the XYZ in my marriage. I want to be this, I want to be a better father. I want to be, a more, physically disciplined person. Like you take actual steps in the direction that you're trying to get towards.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that that's ultimately what I would say like is one of my big goals out of this podcast, is that if we can encourage others to be intentional about the way that they're going about their lives, if we can encourage people to say, hey, the way that I'm doing things right now is fine. Maybe you're unhappy in it. Maybe you're generally happy, or maybe you're just fine with where you're at. I would say that if you're feeling that with any of those ways, then this would be a good podcast to listen to, because the goal behind this is to not make you discontent with what you have. It's content with what you have, but aspiring for something more and pushing yourself outside of the comfort area of where you're in now, so that you can have something significantly better in your life.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited.
I am too. All right. So I feel like that's a really good initial kind of podcast, just like a tease of like what to expect out of all this, a little intro for who Ash and I are.
Yeah, we really want to use the podcast too to go more in depth. When we do the lives, it's so fun, but it's also distracting because there's like hearts popping up on the page and people saying things. And I love the back and forth, but to be able to just really get in deep here. And I feel like we can also just take it to another level of depth through the podcast too. Just sharing a little more even more open. Yeah. Because we can't get canceled.
Like challenge accepted. I think that's not too far down the road.
Yeah. Wait for it. Yeah. You heard it here first, okay? Yeah. Stay tuned for our next episode. We will be sharing more on taking it to 11 on this Designed to Last podcast. We're excited to go down this journey with you.
And just to give you a little bit of a tease, some of the things that we're going to be talking about in these next few podcasts are things like removing sin from yourself and your marriage, doing things like dreaming and creating goals with your spouse so that you are both on a common road, so you guys are actually like moving down a path that is a common destination, right? Because like obviously it's kind of important to make sure you're both rowing in the same direction, right?
Yeah.
So see, these are some of the initial conversations we'll be able to kind of have, and hopefully you'll get something out of it.
Stay tuned next week.
Thanks for coming.